It's a pleasure to be with you.
Professor, in this conference, we are trying to understand the danger to democracy posed by the ascendance of right-wing authoritarian parties and how progressives should respond. 3 decades ago, in your classic book, Democracy's Discontent, you warned of the danger that we now confront. You predicted that neoliberal globalization was likely to provoke reactions from those who would shore up borders, harden the distinction between insiders and outsiders, and promise a politics to take back our culture and take back our country, to restore our sovereignty with a vengeance. Does it give you any comfort to see your dark prediction come true? What explains the success of Trump in the US and the rise of other right-wing populist authoritarian parties and politicians?
Well, Dora, thank you for the question. It gives me no comfort that my worries back in the mid-1990s have come to pass with the threats to democracy that we now experience. Even in the 1990s, it was possible to glimpse the threat, the danger to the democratic project amidst what then seemed a time of peace and prosperity. The Berlin Wall had fallen, the Cold War had ended, the Soviet Union had broken up, and it seemed to many in the West that only one system was left standing, the version of liberal democratic capitalism. It seemed to have won the day. Commentators proclaimed the end of history. But beneath this sense of, well, hubris, and sense of triumph, it was possible to glimpse some mounting discontents with democracy. First, there was a growing sense of disempowerment. People feel less and less in control of the forces that govern their lives. People felt that their voice didn't matter. And second, there were concerns for the erosion of community, a sense of belonging. The age of globalization promised to transcend national borders for the flow of goods, for the flow of capital, for the flow of people. And it seemed as if national borders and national belonging, sense of patriotism and pride, were obsolete, were atavistic. Now, these worries about the loss of self-government and the erosion of community and belonging, these worries deepened in the decades since, and the discontent that was inchoate at the time has become harsh, sharp, a source of deep polarization. And this is largely because of the widening inequalities brought about by the version of neoliberal globalization that was embraced by mainstream parties of the center right and the center left. And so in many ways, it was the failure of that neoliberal market-driven, finance-driven globalization project that created the opening for figures like Donald Trump to appeal to those who've been left behind by 4 or 5 decades of wage stagnation, of the outsourcing of jobs to countries with few protections for labor and for the environment. And what the mainstream parties did, especially progressive parties, was to alienate the working class voters who once constituted their primary base of support, Dora.
And it's a long time, as you said, 4 or 5 decades for those people to sense, to feel that they are left behind. Now, why have center-left parties, such as the Democratic Party in the US, struggled to respond to the mood of anger and discontent? Why have they alienated many of the working class voters who traditionally supported them?
it's important for center-left and progressive parties to figure out an answer to this question, Dora. And the beginning of the answer goes back to the Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher era. They made the explicit argument, Reagan and Thatcher, that government is the problem and that markets are the solution. They embraced the market faith. But even when they were succeeded by center-left political parties and politicians, Bill Clinton in the United States, Tony Blair in Britain, Gerhard Schroeder in Germany, these center-left parties and politicians softened the harsh edges of the Reagan-Thatcher pure laissez-faire approach to the economy. But they didn't challenge its fundamental premise. They didn't challenge the market faith, the idea, the assumption that market mechanisms are the primary instruments for defining and achieving the public good. As a result, these parties, including center-left parties, like the Democratic Party in the United States, accepted uncritically the market faith and deepened the hold of neoliberal globalization on their economies. It was center-left politicians, together with those from the center-right, I'm thinking of Democrats and Republicans in the United States, who embraced the free trade agreements, the outsourcing of jobs, the insistence on capital flow, unfettered capital flows across boundaries, all in the name of increasing GDP. Now, it's true. This period of globalization did produce enormous rewards, but those rewards, most of that increase in GDP went to those at the top. In the US, it went to the top 20%. And for the average worker, the bottom half, almost none of the GDP gains were shared. For 5 decades, the median worker in the United States, in real terms, experienced almost no growth, no wage growth, even as productivity was increasing in the economy as a whole. And so it's not surprising that given 5 decades of stagnant wages and the hollowing out of working class communities in the industrial heartland of the United States, it's no wonder that these voters would look elsewhere. And in 2016, they voted for Donald Trump. At least a great many of them did.
It's a great explanation. We can understand better now after this answer of yours. Now, in your book, The Tyranny of Merit, you write that many working people feel looked down upon the professional classes, especially by well-educated, well-credentialed elites. What accounts for the populist backlash against elites, including elite universities?
Well, we've spoken, Dora, already about widening inequalities. And it's certainly, but that's not the whole story, because it doesn't fully capture the resentment that arises when people feel looked down upon. And so there's something that went along with the economic inequality that explains this, I think. In recent decades, the divide between winners and losers has been deepening, poisoning our politics, setting us apart. This has partly to do with the widening inequalities of income and wealth that we've already discussed. But it also has to do with the changing attitudes towards success that have accompanied the widening inequalities. Those who landed on top during the age of globalization came to believe that their success was their own doing, the measure of their merit, and that they therefore deserved the full bounty that the market bestowed upon them, and by implication, that those who struggle, those left behind, must deserve their Now, this way of thinking about success arises from a seemingly attractive idea, the ideal of meritocracy, the principle that says that those who, that insofar as chances are equal, the winners deserve their winnings. Now, we know that chances are not truly equal in our societies, but the problem could not really fully be solved simply by trying to perfect the meritocracy. Mm-hmm. Because even a fully realized meritocracy, if somehow we could bring it about with genuine equality, fair equality of opportunity, even that meritocracy would be flawed, would have a dark side. And the dark side is that it's corrosive of the common good. Telling people that their success is their own doing leads the successful to inhale too deeply of their own success, to forget the luck and good fortune that help them on their way, to forget their indebtedness to those who make their achievement possible. So what created the resentments, the sense of grievance, the sense of being looked down upon, was only partly the widening economic inequalities. The meritocratic attitudes toward success, the hubris of well-credentialed elites, their tendency to look down on those less successful, less fortunate than themselves. This added insult to the injury of economic inequality. And this explains the politics of hubris and humiliation that Donald Trump and similar right-wing authoritarian figures exploit. Donald Trump promised to be the retribution of those who feel looked down upon.
And we see the results, Professor.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for your presence today for the Institute, and thank you so much for this dialogue that we had.
Thank you, Dora.
Πάντα πολύ.